have to take off my glasses because I can see all of you. It's really weird. Wow, this is amazing. I mean, Portland is amazing. It is kind of amazing on such a nice day in the middle of the day on a Sunday that you're all here. I have the sense that maybe there was a little brunching earlier today. What's in your glass, sir? Mimosa is a crime against wine.
Bloody Marys.
It's really awesome to be here. And you guys know this is a book about war, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We heard that.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming. It's really, really nice to have you all here. And I think what we will do, I have never written a book before. I've never been in this awesome room before. I don't exactly know the right way to do this, but my plan is to read a little squib from the book and then just talk a little bit about what it is more broadly about, but not talk for very long because I think the most fun will be answering your questions. So anybody object? No? Okay.
Yeah.
Robert's rules. I do, you know, I was rereading, having breakfast with myself this morning. Here's the thing, there's a bit that I like to read about a bird that has like a gross part in it. And there's a bit that I like to read that I haven't read as much, which has a little John Travolta in it, but it doesn't have anything gross in it. Anybody want it? So let's vote between the bird and John Travolta. All those in favor of the bird? Okay, all those in favor of John Travolta? It's the bird! If you'd like to meet John Travolta alone, he starts on page 46. All right. The Houbara bustard. The Houbara bustard is not a particularly large or regal bird. It looks a little like what you might get if you bred a common pheasant with an ostrich, like a miniature ostrich with a shorter neck and legs. Or maybe it would be like a pheasant on steroids with a stretched neck and sprinter's legs and a much more impressive wingspan. But the Houbara bustard, this little fella, has recently provided crucial assistance in making America's war in Afghanistan and its spillover in Pakistan the longest-running military hot show in our nation's history. In May 2011, Pakistan got its nose out of joint when U.S. Special Forces sprung a surprise mission on a compound in Abbottabad and offed the most infamous terrorist on the planet without giving a heads up to the host government. The Pakistani military and intelligence service found itself having to explain how the target, Osama bin Laden, could have been living in tranquility just a few miles down the road from Pakistan's most important military academy, in a neighborhood crawling with current and retired military officers. Was Pakistani intelligence that incompetent, or were they protecting bin Laden? And then they had to explain how a U.S. strike force and its very, very large helicopters could fly into Abbottabad, spend nearly an hour on the ground, and then leave the country with bin Laden's carcass in tow without being detected, let alone stopped. While President Obama and the rest of America took a celebratory victory lap, the Pakistanis found the entire episode hugely shaming. But not so much on the bin Laden in our backyard count. They really focused on the lack of respect accorded their nation by the United States. American troops coming across the border and taking action in one of our towns is not acceptable to the people of Pakistan, former President Pervez Musharraf said the day after the raid. It is a violation of our sovereignty. The Pakistani parliament called the country's military and intelligence chieftains into a rare and marathon closed-door session, where frankly the generals did have a spot of trouble covering their respective lapses. But they did deflect much of the civilians' ire. The United States, they reminded everyone, was the real bad guy here. The generals had little trouble encouraging Parliament to formally demand that henceforth the United States would ensure that Pakistan's national interests were fully respected. Ally schmally, the Pakistani people deserve some respect. To add some bite to this declaration of sovereignty, the generals suggested a good first step would be forcing the United States to shut down the secret program the CIA had been running out of an airbase in a remote corner of Pakistan called Balochistan. Unfortunately, in publicizing their demand that the CIA leave that airbase, The generals also revealed to a surprised Pakistani legislature that the CIA had been using that airbase. This was cause for an uproar in Parliament, but the fact that the CIA had been flying armed drones out of the airfield, an airfield known as Shamsi, came as much less of a surprise to the citizens of those areas that the drones were targeting, tribal regions. The CIA's rather dumpy-looking, high-tech, unmanned aircraft had been used mostly for surveillance in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan, but they could also be armed with Hellfire missiles. Very occasionally, from 2004 to 2007, more frequently in the last year of the George W. Bush administration in 2008, the Bush administration had used drones to launch airborne attacks on suspected terrorists in Pakistan. But when the Obama administration took over in 2009, the number of drone attacks spiked that year. And then the next year, in 2010, those 2009 numbers more than doubled. The Obama administration refused, as a matter of policy, to officially acknowledge the CIA's drone attacks. But in the days following a big get, they announced that some key Al-Qaeda or Haqqani network leader was killed in the passive voice, as if the event were an act of providence or like a rainbow, some sort of remarkable atmospheric happening. These drone attacks had become the centerpiece of President Obama's recalibration of America's global war on terror, even if we don't call it that anymore. The Obama administration had no intention of pulling up stakes in Shamsi. That base is neither vacated nor being vacated, was the anonymous but official word from Washington. It was a sort of Mexican standoff in Balochistan. But here's where that bird comes in. Here's where the Hubara bustard provided a little wiggle room in what otherwise looked like well, this is one of those things where it's different when you say it out loud than it is in print. What I have here is what otherwise looked like a very naughty situation, but it's naughty with a K. Not naughty with a G. I should change that. If I'm going to read this out loud, here's where the Hubara Buster provided a little wiggle room in what otherwise looked like a very naughty situation. This tiny forgotten strip of land that held the airbase in Shamsi, it turned out, did not actually belong to Pakistan. It had been quietly signed over 20 years earlier to the United Arab Emirates in a show of friendship between the two countries. You see, Balochistan, aside from being full of spectacular Garden of Eden natural wonders, and that's I've heard that from a lot of people who have been there. I had a visa to go visit Pakistan that disappeared once the Raymond Davis CIA shooting thing happened last year, so I have never been, but I've heard that both Balochistan and the Swat Valley and both sides of the border in Kashmir is some of the most spectacular scenery anywhere on Earth. And I would love to see it, but it's hard to get there. Balochistan, aside from being full of spectacular Garden of Eden natural wonders, is among the few wintering grounds of the Hubara bustard. It's a bird held in high esteem among hunters from the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Falconry is the sport of Arab kings, and this poor bustard has long been the preferred prey for Arab falconers. So Emirati royalty were really pleased to have this special foothold in Balochistan, and right away they build themselves a sizable landing strip, runway, for easy access to this surprisingly sought-after remote corner of the world. Quote, "The sheikhs tell me it is the ultimate challenge for the falcon," a chieftain in Balochistan told New Yorker writer Marianne Weaver back around the time that the UAE built the Shamsi airstrip. Quote, "The falcon is the fastest bird on Earth, and the Hubara is also fast, both on the ground and in the air." This is my favorite part of the whole book. "It is also a clever, wary bird with a number of tricks. Among these tricks," the chieftain continued, "is an ability to inkjet a dark green slime violently from its vent." You know what a vent is in a bird, right? Like Thanksgiving, right? That's how we get stuffing. Actually, that's not how you get stuffing. I don't know. It's the part of the bird where stuff can come out. Anyway, never mind. Not the mouth. "Among these tricks," the chieftain continued, "is an ability to inkjet a dark green slime violently from its vent, Its force is so strong that it can spread for 3 feet, and it can temporarily blind the falcon or glue its feathers together, making it unable to fly. The belief also persisted that the meat of the bustard was an aphrodisiac. Not hard to see why the bustard had been sought and consumed with such sustained effort that the bird was nearly extinct on the Arabian Peninsula. Cold War politics had added degrees of difficulty for the sportsman as well. The fall of the Shah in 1979 made bustard hunting problematic for Sunni Arabs in Shiite Iran, as had the near-constant state of war in Afghanistan. So Balochistan emerged as the destination spot for latter-day Arab Nimrods. For the last 20 years, which sounds like an insult, it just means hunter. It's one of those words like bucket. There's nothing inherently funny about the word bucket except it sounds funny. Bucket. Nimrod sounds funny. Anyway. For the last 20 years or so, Emirati sheikhs and Saudi princes and the more general run of ambitious Arab dignitaries had jockeyed for the best allotments in the last good place on earth to hunt the Hubara bustard. When Pakistan's Foreign Office bestowed upon the Emiratis an allotment that was once held by the Saudis, I kid you not, the Saudis withheld oil supplies from Pakistan and money for flood relief. It's a serious business. Arab royalty of various stripes show up every year with, according to Weaver's description, pop-up tent cities, hundreds of servants, satellite dishes for better communication, and hunting vehicles tricked out with sophisticated laptops, infrared spotlights, and bustard-seeking radar. Maybe not sporting, but it is certainly effective. Almost done. The Emiratis had made one concession that slightly crimped their style in the Hubara bustard hunting department. In the weeks after the 9/11 attacks in 2001, when everybody wanted to pitch in, they had agreed, with the consent of Pakistani President Musharraf, to let the Americans use Shamsi. Let the Americans use Shamsi as a base to supply US troops fighting the Taliban just across the border in Afghanistan, but also maybe for a few special and classified operations. In the 10 years that followed, as the CIA began operating lethal attack drones out of Shamsi, and the remote top secret, in the 10 years that followed, as the CIA began operating lethal attack drones out of Shamsi, that remote top secret base, it remained off limits to Pakistan's own Air Force, even though it was inside Pakistan. So when the bleep hit the fan, when the slime hit the falcon, in the aftermath of the bin Laden raid, thanks to the Hubara bustard, everybody had an out. The United States could make it plain that the CIA was not leaving Shamsi. Pakistan could still save face nonetheless. Pakistani government officials could say, and they did, hey, we just checked our land records and it turns out this little strip of Balochistan is not, legally speaking, Pakistan-controlled territory after all. We gave it to the Emiratis for bustard hunting. So sorry, but there's nothing we can do to stop the part of America's secret drone war that is operating out of Shamsi. We do condemn it in the strongest possible language, however. The United Arab Emirates, meanwhile, went on record saying they had only built the airstrip there. Emirati sheikhs and others used it for recreational purposes. What recreation the CIA was pursuing there, the Emiratis could not say. Shamsi, they assured the world, was never operated or controlled by the UAE. And so in the end, we still had our drone base in Shamsi, and no skittish ally had to take the blame for having handed it over to us. That's the bird part.